I built my parents a $310,000 cottage by the water for their 40th anniversary. When I pulled into the driveway, my mother was standing on the porch in her bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon, and my father, a man who had never once asked anyone for anything, had sent me a text that said only, "Please come, now." My sister's car was in the driveway. So was a truck I didn't recognize, backed up to the side door with its hatch open. My name is Riley. I'm 32. I work in contract administration for a commercial construction firm, which means I spend my days turning other people's vague promises into legally binding language. I know exactly what words mean and exactly what they don't. I know which clauses protect you and which ones quietly destroy you 3 years later when nobody is paying attention. I learned this the hard way, the way most people learn the things that define them by watching someone I loved get taken apart slowly and deciding I would never let that happen again. My father was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's when I was 19. My mother became his caregiver almost overnight. She folded her own life into his like a note tucked into a pocket quietly, completely, without complaint. For the next 13 years, she managed his medications, drove him to every appointment, researched every clinical trial, and laughed at his jokes even when his hands shook and his voice came out softer than he meant it to. They never asked for help. That was the thing about them. They simply never asked. So I decided to give it anyway. I had been saving since my first real paycheck. Not obsessively, just consistently, the way you build anything worth keeping. When I found the property 2 years ago, a half-acre lot on a quiet lake 90 minutes from the city, I knew, immediately. There was a small structure on it that the listing called a cottage with potential, which was real estate language for something a developer would level, but the lot was perfect. The water was dark and still and ringed with hemlocks, and when I stood at the edge of it on a gray November morning, I thought, Dad could sit here and watch the light change for hours and be completely at peace. I bought it. Then I did what I do. I drew up the project scope myself, hired a contractor I had worked with for 6 years, pulled every permit personally, and built something that could hold them. One story, fully accessible, wide doorways, grab bars that looked like architectural details rather than medical equipment, a kitchen counter at the right height for my father's reach on difficult days, a wraparound porch so he could always find a patch of sun without navigating steps. I never told my sister. That requires some explanation. Vanessa is 4 years older than me. She is not a bad person in the way that makes the news. She is bad in the quieter, more exhausting way, the kind that only costs you gradually, in small amounts, until one day you realize you've been depleted for years, and you're standing in a contractor's trailer at midnight trying to figure out how to afford the next phase of a project you took on alone because you knew better than to involve her. When Dad was first diagnosed, Vanessa showed up for approximately 6 weeks. She made casseroles. She cried in the kitchen with our mother. She told the extended family about his condition with the gravity of someone delivering a eulogy, which was premature and unhelpful. Then she got a new job. Then she met Craig and got engaged, and her attention redirected entirely, the way a river will if you give it a new channel. I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because it is the factual record. While my mother spent 3 years calibrating Dad's medication schedule like a scientist, Vanessa sent updates to the family group chat and felt, I think, that she had contributed. Craig is a different category entirely. Craig is the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately calculates what he can extract from it. He has a spreadsheet brain behind a used car salesman warmth, and in 6 years of marriage to my sister, he has never once done anything that did not benefit Craig. He understands his own angle the way a compass knows north. I didn't tell them about the cottage because I didn't want their input. I didn't want Craig measuring countertops before the gift was given. I didn't want Vanessa's tears at the reveal turned into content. I didn't want the project to become something they participated in retroactively and then claimed. So I worked quietly. I drove up alone on weekends to check progress. I financed everything myself, the land, the build, the furnishings, the dock, $310,000 total. I set up a separate escrow account and prepaid property taxes for 15 years. I stocked the pantry. When the structure was finished and the dock was built and the hemlock trees were reflected perfectly in the still water, I placed the deed into an irrevocable trust with my parents as the sole lifetime beneficiaries. Then I arranged the surprise. I told them I was taking them to dinner for their anniversary. Instead, I drove them 90 minutes through October light to a gravel road they had never seen. When I stopped and pointed at a porch light glowing against the dark tree line, my father turned to face me and could not speak for nearly a full minute. My mother put her hand over her mouth. She finally said, very quietly, "Is this real?" "Yes," I said. "It's yours." Both of your names are in the trust. Nobody can take it from you. Nobody can sell it. It will be here as long as you want it. Dad made it up the 2 porch steps without his cane. He stood at the railing and looked at the water and said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steadier than it had been in years. I used to think we'd missed our chance at something like this, he said. I thought that ship had sailed a long time ago. I stayed with them that first weekend. We ate takeout on the porch. We watched the sun come down over the water and turn everything amber and quiet. I helped Dad figure out the grab bar placement in the shower. My mother reorganized the kitchen drawers twice because she couldn't stop touching things. On Sunday morning, I drove back to the city for a Monday deadline and felt the specific peace of something done right. I should have known better than to feel that peaceful. Vanessa found out 3 days later. My mother, who cannot keep a secret when she is happy, mentioned the cottage during a phone call. She probably glowed through the receiver. Vanessa asked for the address. My mother called me that same evening, her voice a careful, managed neutral. Vanessa wants to come see it this weekend, with Craig and the boys, just for a quick visit. Is that okay? I said, Mom, it's your house. You decide who visits. She said, Of course. I just wanted to check with you first, which was her way of telling me she already felt something pulling wrong. I should have driven up that Saturday. Instead, I had a project deadline and a contractor dispute I couldn't walk away from, and I told myself it was just a visit. I told myself my sister was not Craig. I told myself the legal structure was solid. I told myself to stop treating every situation like a contract waiting to collapse. I was wrong. My father's text arrived Tuesday morning at 7:14. I was underground in a parking structure, and the message didn't load until I hit the street. Please come. Now. Vanessa says we should all discuss the property together. Craig has been making calls. I don't understand what is happening. His phone went to voicemail when I called. So did my mother's. I called 4 more times between my office building and my car. The drive felt like the longest 90 minutes of my life. I knew something had shifted before I even turned onto the gravel road. There were 2 cars in the driveway, Vanessa's SUV and Craig's pickup, and from the driveway I could see Craig standing on the dock with his phone out, photographing the water. He was measuring the dock length by walking heel to toe, counting under his breath. He didn't hear me pull in. My mother was at the kitchen window when I came through the door. Her face held the expression she made when she was trying to carry too many things at once. My father was seated at the kitchen table. In front of him was a manila folder I didn't recognize. Vanessa was in the living room, reorganizing the bookshelf as though it were her own. She looked up and smiled. Riley, finally, we've been trying to reach you. I set my bag down. What is happening? She set a book aside and turned to face me, and her expression was the one I'd grown up watching, warm, reasonable, slightly injured in advance. We just think there should be a conversation about this property. Craig has some ideas about how to make it work for everyone. Make what work? As a rental. Short-term, summer season. Craig knows a management company that handles everything. You wouldn't have to think about it at all. We're talking maybe 30, 40,000 a season. Mom and Dad come when it's not booked. Everyone wins. I looked at my father. His jaw was set in the particular way I knew meant controlled rage. I never agreed to this, he said. His voice was quiet, but his eyes were not. I told them that. Dad is being protective, which is sweet, Vanessa said. But Craig ran actual numbers and the back door opened, and Craig came in from the dock. He had the easy authority of someone who had already decided the outcome before arriving. He glanced at me, gave a single nod, and dropped a printed page on the kitchen table. Rental projection, he said. Conservative estimate. I've already had a conversation with 2 platforms. We can have a live listing by Friday. I looked at the document. Then I looked at him. You listed this property? Not live yet. Preliminary. He sat down the way people sit in their own homes. Look, I get it. You put in a lot of work. We're not trying to cut you out. We just want to maximize the asset. It sits empty most of the week. That's money walking out the door. It's not an asset, I said. It's my parents' home. It's a vacation property, he said. There is a difference. My mother came and stood beside my father and put her hand on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. I breathed once, slowly. Then I went out to my car and retrieved my briefcase. I have a habit that Craig would probably call paranoid and that I call professional. Every personal property transaction I manage receives the same documentation treatment as my commercial projects. Everything filed, everything timestamped, everything cross-referenced. I had brought the full file. I set it on the kitchen table and opened it. Craig watched me the way people watch someone they think is about to embarrass themselves. I placed the first document down. The deed, I said, recorded with the county 10 months ago. This property is held in an irrevocable trust. My parents are named as the sole lifetime beneficiaries. The trust instrument grants them, and I'm quoting directly, exclusive and unconditional right of occupancy and use, with no provision for subletting, short-term rental, or commercial use of any kind without written consent from the trustee. Vanessa's chin came up slightly. And you're the trustee. I am. So you control it. I protect it. That's different. My obligation as trustee is to ensure this property is used according to its terms. Those terms exist to protect mom and dad, not to fund your management company contact. Craig leaned back. Trust language can be challenged. I placed the second document on the table. You're welcome to try. I slid it forward. This is a written legal opinion from a property attorney confirming the trust structure is valid, properly recorded, and not subject to challenge by non-beneficiaries. Non-beneficiaries means everyone in this room except my parents. The kitchen was very quiet. I also want to address the listings, I said. I had found them that morning, searching the property address on a lunch break. I'd turned up a draft Craig had already uploaded to one platform, set to go live on Thursday. This is a screenshot of a draft rental listing posted under a management account registered to an address that matches yours, Craig. It uses photographs of this property taken from the dock, which I watched you take through my windshield when I arrived. Craig's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. That listing constitutes commercial use of a property you have no legal authority to use for commercial purposes. It also constitutes misrepresentation to the rental platform, since you are neither the owner nor any authorized agent of the owner. I submitted a takedown request with supporting documentation to the platform's fraud team this morning. It will be processed within 24 hours. Vanessa opened her mouth. Riley, you're being precise, I said, which is what the situation calls for. I placed a third document on the table. This is the township ordinance governing short-term rentals in this county. Properties in this zone require a special use permit, a health and safety inspection, and a noise compliance agreement filed with the township clerk. There is no permit on record for this address because no application was ever filed. Operating without one carries a fine of up to $8,000 per violation, plus a mandatory 60-day review period during which no rentals are permitted. Craig stared at the paper. He was recalibrating. I could see it happening. And this, I said, placing the final page in front of them, is a cease and desist. It is addressed to both of you, jointly. It formally notifies you that any further attempt to list, lease, photograph for commercial purposes, misrepresent, or otherwise treat this property as available for any use beyond my parents' private occupancy will be treated as tortious interference with the trust and will result in immediate legal action. My firm's senior attorney is copied. They're expecting my call this afternoon. Craig looked at the documents, then at me. This is insane, he said. His charm had gone thin. We're family. You're guests, I said, and currently guests who have overstayed. You did all of this because you want control, he said. You built this place so you could hold it over everyone. You've always done that. I looked at him for a moment. I built this place, I said, because my father stood in a hospital corridor 13 years ago and found out his own body was going to work against him, and my mother went home that night and quietly began rearranging her entire life around that fact. I built it because they earned somewhere soft to land, not an income stream, not your next project. Craig said nothing. I need you both to leave, I said. You can come back when you've been invited by the people whose names are actually in the deed. What followed was not graceful. Craig made phone calls in the driveway loud enough for me to hear through the kitchen window, using words like legal options and trustee overreach. Vanessa spent 20 minutes in the bathroom. Their sons, 10 and 12 and completely confused, sat on the porch steps and threw gravel at each other. Eventually, the truck pulled out. The SUV followed. My mother made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table and said very little. The first weekend they came, she said, after a long while, Craig walked the entire property. He asked about the dock weight limit. He asked about the septic capacity. I thought he was just curious. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I should have called you then. My father came in from the porch and stood in the doorway. He asked me about adding a boathouse, Dad said. I told him it wasn't my call. He told me I should think bigger. He paused. I am thinking bigger. I just don't want a boathouse. It surprised me into laughing, but I did. Before I left that evening, I checked the locks and the window latches out of habit. I'd had a security system installed during the build motion activated cameras at the driveway, the dock, and the back property line, all feeding to an app on my phone. I showed my parents how to pull up the feeds on the tablet mounted in the kitchen, and I made sure the playback settings were saved correctly. "You thought of everything," my mother said. "I tried to," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't anticipate this part." "How could you have?" my father said. I didn't answer that because the honest answer was, maybe I could have. I know how Craig operates. I know how my sister yields to him. I know that a beautiful thing, left unguarded for even a week, looks like opportunity in the wrong set of eyes. But I had wanted them to have at least a few weeks of uncomplicated joy. I had wanted to give the gift before I had to defend it. The social media campaign started 4 days later. Craig posted first. A long, carefully vague caption about generosity used as control and how real love doesn't come with strings. It was deniable enough to avoid names and specific enough that anyone who knew our family understood exactly what he meant. Vanessa shared it. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years sent me a concerned message. 2 of my mother's friends from church texted her with worried questions. I wrote one response. It was an email addressed to Craig and Vanessa with my parents' estate attorney and my firm's senior attorney copied. It noted, without elaboration, that any public statements I could verify as referencing me, my parents, or the property would be addressed as defamation if materially false, and as tortious interference if they caused harm to any protected interest under the trust. It asked all future communication to be directed through my firm's office. I set a rule in my inbox to route their addresses to a separate folder I would review on my own schedule. The posts were gone within 48 hours. 2 weeks after that, my father called on a Tuesday morning with controlled panic in his voice. "There's a man at the door," he said. "He says he has a rental agreement. He says Craig arranged it. He has paperwork." I told my father to go inside, lock the door, and not sign anything. I pulled up the driveway camera feed from my work computer. A car I didn't recognize. A man standing on the porch holding a folder. I called the township's non-emergency line and reported an individual presenting fraudulent documentation at a private residence. Then I texted Craig a screenshot from the camera feed with one message. "I am watching this in real time. The trust documents are on file with the county and with local law enforcement. I suggest your contact leave before the deputy arrives." His reply came in 4 minutes. "Tell him he got the wrong address. Sorry, our mistake." The car was gone before the deputy reached the road. That weekend, I drove up with a locksmith and replaced the entry hardware with a keypad deadbolt so my parents wouldn't have to manage keys on difficult days. When I tested the system, Dad stood beside me and watched the camera feeds refresh on the kitchen tablet. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said. "What?" "How much of my life I spent trying not to be a burden, trying to make everything manageable for everyone, not asking for too much." He was quiet for a moment. "I never once thought I was allowed to say, 'This is mine. You can't touch it.'" I looked at him. "You're allowed," I said. "I know that now." He smiled, and it was the smile I remembered from before the diagnosis. Unguarded, unmanaged. You made it real. A month later, on a Sunday when the light was low and gold over the water, I drove up with no particular reason. No emergency. No task. Just a bag of groceries and a thermos of coffee, which had become my shorthand for, "I just wanted to see you." My mother was on the porch with a book. My father was at the dock, moving carefully the way he always did now, but moving. The bird feeder we had hung together on my second visit had drawn a pair of cardinals who had apparently claimed the dock as their territory. He heard me on the porch steps and turned. "Sit down," he said. "Watch this." The male chases her for exactly 30 seconds, and then they eat together like nothing happened. I sat down and watched the cardinals. After a while, my mother came out with her coffee and a blanket and settled beside me. The 3 of us stayed there for a long time without saying much. There was nothing that needed saying. Vanessa has not called me. I don't know if she will. That door is open, but I'm not standing in front of it waiting. Craig sent one email 6 weeks after the driveway incident with the subject line moving forward. 2 sentences, an acknowledgement that he had handled things poorly, and a request to revisit the conversation at some point. I read it once. I moved it to the folder. I haven't replied. What I understand now, sitting on that dock in the October light, is that I spent a very long time believing love meant absorption. That caring for people meant folding their needs into yours indefinitely, carrying what they dropped, paying what they couldn't, being the one who handled things so thoroughly that everyone else forgot what handling things cost. That if you drew a line, You were the problem. What I know now is different. I can love my parents completely and still refuse to let their home become a transaction. I can love my sister and still hand her husband a cease and desist. I can want my family to be whole and still hold the boundary that makes wholeness possible in the first place. A boundary isn't a wall. It doesn't close anything. It's the frame that keeps the house from falling. I didn't build that cottage to own something or to hold something over anyone. I built it because there was a version of my parents' life I could see clearly, and I wanted to make it real. A place where my father watches the light change on the water and doesn't have to be anywhere else. A place where my mother opens kitchen drawers at her own pace and exhales. A place with solid locks and 15 years of property tax already paid, and a legal structure so clean that not even Craig's spreadsheet brain could find a seam to pry open. Nothing about love means leaving what you built unprotected. And nothing about protecting what you built means you've stopped loving. If you've ever been the one who handled things and then had to stand between what you built and the people who wanted to take it, share this. Someone out there needs to hear that holding the line is not the same as losing the family. Sometimes it's the only way to keep what matters most standing.